Did you know Elvis Presley once bought 14 Cadillacs in a single day, giving most of them away on the spot? Or that he dropped over $800,000 in 1970s money, turning a former commercial airliner into his own flying palace, complete with gold-plated seatbelts. He even had a room in his house with green shag carpet on the ceiling and an indoor waterfall. And those iconic jumpsuits? Some cost more than a brand new car back then. Get ready, because the way the king of rock and roll spent his money was almost as legendary as his music. Number 11. He bought Graceland when he was just 22 years old. Okay, let's start with the big one, Graceland. It's practically synonymous with Elvis. But picture this, it's 1957. Elvis is barely out of his teens, just 22 years old, but already a global superstar, thanks to hits like Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and Don't Be Cruel. While most guys his age were maybe saving for a used car, Elvis was house hunting. And not just any house. He needed space, privacy, from the adoring, and sometimes overwhelming fans, and a place big enough for his parents, Vernon and Gladys, and his grandmother, Minnie May. He found Graceland, a colonial revival mansion sitting on 13.8 acres just outside Memphis. The asking price, a cool $102,500. Now that sounds like a steal today, but back in 1957, it was a hefty sum, roughly equivalent to over $1 million in today's money. For a 22-year-old, it was an astronomical purchase. He reportedly put down $10,000 cash and took out a mortgage for the rest, which he paid off relatively quickly. But buying it was just the beginning. Graceland became Elvis's ultimate passion project, his sanctuary, and a canvas for his unique tastes. He immediately started making changes. One of the first and most famous additions was the music gates, those iconic wrought iron gates shaped like musical notes and guitars, designed by Abe Sauer. They weren't just decorative. They were a statement. Over the years, the spending on Graceland continued relentlessly. He added a kidney-shaped swimming pool, stables for his horses, we'll get to those later, a carport that eventually became a trophy room, and eventually the famous meditation garden where he and members of his family are now buried. He expanded the property, buying up adjacent land to increase privacy and space. Inside, the renovations were constant. Rooms were redecorated according to his whims. Think plush carpets, custom furniture, and eventually some pretty wild additions like the TV room with its 3 television sets, so he could watch all 3 major networks at once, a common practice for him, and the mirrored staircase. He installed sophisticated security systems and intercoms throughout the massive house. Maintaining Graceland wasn't cheap either. It required a significant staff: groundskeepers, housekeepers, cooks, security personnel, and administrators, many managed by his father Vernon. The utility bills alone for such a large estate would have been substantial. Graceland wasn't just a home. It was an enterprise, a symbol of his success, and a place he poured millions into over the 2 decades he lived there. It became the heart of his world, the place he always returned to, no matter how far his fame took him. And it all started with a massive purchase by a rock and roll kid who had just hit the big time. Number 10. His car collection was absolutely wild, and he gave tons away. Elvis Presley, L-O-V-E-D cars, like really loved them. It wasn't just a casual interest, it was a full-blown obsession, fueled by his massive fortune. He didn't just collect them. He bought them constantly, often on impulse, and sometimes in bulk. His taste was eclectic, ranging from American muscle and luxury cruisers to exotic European sports cars. The most famous Elvis car story, of course, involves Cadillacs. Cadillacs were the symbol of success in the 50s and 60s, and Elvis embraced them wholeheartedly. His legendary 1955 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60 started out blue, but he famously had it repainted a custom pink Elvis rose for his mother, Gladys. Even though she didn't drive, it became an iconic symbol. But that was just the beginning. Elvis owned a fleet of Cadillacs throughout his life. Eldorados, Fleetwoods, DeVilles, you name it. He bought them in various colors, often to chime with extras. There's a legendary story from 1975 where Elvis was browsing at a Memphis Cadillac dealership. A bank teller named Minnie L. Person happened to be admiring a white Eldorado Biarritz convertible, but mentioned she couldn't afford it. Elvis reportedly struck up a conversation, found out her birthday was coming up, and told the salesman, "Give the lady the car," arranging to pay the $11,500 sticker price on the spot. This wasn't a one-off. One of the most mind-boggling tales is the time he allegedly bought 14 Cadillacs in a single day in July 1975 from the same dealership, spending over $140,000 in one go. That's like $750,000 today. He kept one or two and gave the rest away to friends, family, members of his entourage, and even people he barely knew, like Denver Police Captain Jerry Kennedy, a white Lincoln Continental Mark IV, not a Caddy, but same impulse. His generosity with cars was almost as famous as his collection. He saw them as tangible ways to share his wealth and show appreciation. But his garage wasn't just Cadillacs. He owned multiple Lincoln Continentals, including the one President Kennedy was assassinated in, which Elvis later bought and conned, several Rolls-Royces, like a Phantom V, and multiple Mercedes-Benz models including the highly sought-after Mercedes-Benz 600 limousine, a favorite among celebrities and dignitaries. He also had a taste for sportier, more exotic machines. He owned Ferraris, like a Dino 308 GT4, De Tomaso Panteras, one of which he famously shot when it wouldn't start, several Stutz tires, a neoclassic luxury car popular in the 70s. He bought the first one ever sold and owned at least 4, Bemis, like the rare 507 Roadster he acquired while stationed in Germany. Estimates vary, but Elvis likely owned hundreds of vehicles throughout his lifetime. Many were touched with things like televisions, bars, and upgraded sound systems. The cost was enormous, not just for the initial purchase, but for insurance, maintenance, customization, and storage. His love affair with automobiles was a constant, expensive passion, leaving behind a legacy of stunning machines and incredible stories of four-wheeled impulse buys and generosity. Several of these vehicles are now prized exhibits in museums, testament to the king's extravagant automotive tastes. Number 9. He owned multiple private jets, including one named after his daughter. When you're the biggest star on the planet, touring and traveling constantly, commercial flights just don't cut it. Elvis took air travel to a whole new level, acquiring his own fleet of private aircraft, culminating in a former commercial airliner that he transformed into a flying palace. His most famous plane was a Convair 880 jet, which had previously flown for Delta Airlines. Elvis purchased it in April 1975 for $250,000. But that was just the starting price. He then spent an estimated $600,000 to $800,000 completely refurbishing the interior to his exact specifications. That's over $4 million in today's money, just for the renovations. He christened it the Lisa Marie, after his beloved daughter. The Lisa Marie wasn't just a plane, it was Graceland in the sky. The customization was pure Elvis extravagance. It featured a lavish master bedroom with a queen-size bed, a conference room with plush swivel chairs and a large table, a sitting room with suede sofas, and multiple bathrooms. The fixtures were reportedly gold-plated, including the seatbelt buckles and bathroom sinks. It boasted a state-of-the-art quadraphonic sound system with dozens of speakers throughout the cabin, perfect for listening to music or watching movies on the multiple VCRs and televisions. The plane even had a call system with different colored lights to summon specific members of his entourage. The tail was painted with his personal TCB, taking care of business logo, a lightning bolt striking a cloud. Owning and operating a jet of this size was incredibly expensive. The fuel costs alone were enormous. It required a dedicated flight crew, pilots, co-pilots, flight engineers, and flight attendants, all on Elvis's payroll. Maintenance on a complex machine like the Convair 880 was constant and costly. Parking and landing fees at airports added up quickly. Before the Lisa Marie, Elvis owned other planes. He had a smaller Lockheed Jetstar, purchased in 1974, which he nicknamed Hound Dog II. This served as a quicker, more agile option for shorter trips, while the Lisa Marie was being IM. He also briefly owned another Jetstar and a Gulfstream G1 turboprop. Elvis used his planes extensively, not just for touring between concert venues, but for personal trips as well. There's the famous story of him flying from Memphis to Denver and back in the middle of the night, reportedly on the Lisa Marie, just to get a specific sandwich. The fool's gold loaf, a hollowed-out loaf of bread filled with peanut butter jelly and a pound of bacon, said to cost around $50 at the time, the sandwich, not the flight. While the specifics of that particular trip are debated, it illustrates the kind of impulsive travel his private Air Force enabled. The planes represented ultimate freedom and luxury, for Elvis, allowing him to travel the country on his own schedule, surrounded by his inner circle, in unparalleled comfort and style. The sheer cost of purchasing, customizing, staffing, fueling, and maintaining these flying machines represented a significant chunk of his spending. Today, the Lisa Marie and Hound Dog II sit proudly on display across the street from Graceland, permanent monuments to the king's high-flying lifestyle. Number 8. Bling King. He dropped fortunes on custom jewelry. Elvis didn't just wear jewelry. He dripped in it. Gold chains, massive rings, diamond-encrusted pendants, gem-studded belts. His collection was legendary and incredibly valuable. For Elvis, jewelry wasn't just an accessory. It was a statement, a symbol of his success, his personal philosophy, and often a way to show affection and loyalty to those around him. His most iconic pieces were undoubtedly the TCB and T-E-T-C necklaces. TCB stood for Taken Care of Business, a motto Elvis adopted for himself and his inner circle, the Memphis Mafia. The logo featured a lightning bolt striking a cloud. He commissioned numerous TCB pendants, usually crafted in 1/4K gold, often adorned with diamonds. These weren't just for him. He gifted them to his male friends and associates as symbols of belonging to his trusted group. Similarly, TLHC stood for tender loving care, and these necklaces, often more delicate and sometimes featuring gemstones, were gifted to the important women in his life. These custom pieces were designed by Memphis jeweler Lowell Hayes, who created many of Elvis's most famous items. But the TCB/TLC pieces were just the tip of the iceberg. Elvis had a penchant for large, flashy rings, worn on multiple fingers simultaneously. He favored bold designs featuring diamonds, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and other precious stones set in heavy gold or platinum. Some famous examples include a massive horseshoe ring, various lion head rings, and rings spelling out his name or initials in diamonds. The value of some individual rings ran into the tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially considering the size and quality of the gems he favored. Beyond rings and necklaces, Elvis loved elaborate belt buckles, often encrusted with jewels to match his stage outfits. He wore multiple gold chains, bracelets including heavy ID bracelets, and high-end watches, often Trajan or featuring precious metals and diamonds. Think brands like Rolex and Omega. But given the Elvis treatment, he didn't just buy off-the-shelf items. Much of his jewelry was custom-made, designed to his specific tastes, which leaned towards the bold, symbolic, and undeniably attention-grabbing. He worked closely with jewelers like Lowell Hayes and Harry Levitch in Memphis, commissioning unique pieces throughout his career. The sheer volume and value of his collection were staggering. He reportedly spent hundreds of thousands, likely millions of dollars, on jewelry over the years. It wasn't unusual for him to buy multiple expensive pieces at once. And just like with cars, Elvis was incredibly generous with his bling. He frequently gifted expensive rings, watches, and necklaces to friends, family, band members, backup singers, and even fans or acquaintances he met briefly. Giving away a diamond ring or a gold chain was a common Elvis gesture. His jewelry wasn't just stored away. He wore it constantly, on stage, off stage, at home. It was an integral part of his image, especially in the 1970s. Those sparkling jewels catching the stage lights became as much a part of the Elvis spectacle as the jumpsuits and the swiveling hips. The cost of acquiring, insuring, and sometimes replacing, due to loss or gifting, this vast treasure trove of gems and precious metals represented a significant and ongoing expenditure throughout his peak earning years. Number 7. He had a serious gun collection. Alongside the flashy cars and sparkling jewelry, Elvis Presley harbored another expensive passion: collecting firearms. This wasn't just a casual hobby. The king amassed a significant and diverse collection of guns, ranging from historical pieces to tauntaun modern firearms, and he wasn't shy about his enthusiasm for them. His collection reportedly included dozens, possibly hundreds, of firearms over the years. He owned various types: handguns, pistols, and revolvers, rifles, and shotguns. His interest spanned different eras and styles. He was known to appreciate the craftsmanship and history behind certain pieces, but he also enjoyed modern firepower. Elvis particularly favored handguns, He owned numerous Colt pistols, including variations of the famous Colt 45, Model 1911. Smith & Wesson revolvers were also prominent in his collection. He famously owned a Walther PK, the same model favored by James Bond, which certainly appealed to Elvis's sense of cool. Derringers, small and easily concealable pistols, were another type he collected and sometimes carried. Like his cars and jewelry, Elvis often went for timer or embellished firearms. He owned guns with pearl handles, intricate engravings, and even gold plating. These weren't just functional tools, they were collector's items, sometimes treated as display pieces or status symbols. He reportedly commissioned custom work, tailoring firearms to his specific aesthetic preferences. Imagine a gleaming, engraved Colt 45. That was Elvis's style. He didn't just collect guns, he enjoyed shooting them. There are numerous stories about Elvis engaging in target practice, sometimes in impromptu locations. The most infamous tales involve him shooting television sets when he didn't like what was being broadcast. While perhaps exaggerated over time, these stories highlight his impulsive nature and comfort level around firearms. He reportedly kept guns accessible at Graceland and sometimes carried a concealed weapon for which he often had permits or honorary badges from various police departments. His interest in law enforcement was intertwined with his gun collecting. Elvis admired police officers and collected police badges from departments across the country, often receiving them as honorary gifts. This connection sometimes facilitated his ability to acquire or carry firearms. Maintaining such a collection involved considerable expense. High-quality firearms, especially Shawgent or antique pieces, can be very costly. There were also costs associated with ammunition, maintenance, secure storage, safes and display cases, and potentially permits or licenses depending on the location and type of firearm. He also gifted firearms, though perhaps less frequently than cars or jewelry. Guns were occasionally given to members of the Memphis Mafia or close friends who shared his interest. Elvis's gun collection reflected a side of his personality often overshadowed by his musical image, an interest in history, craftsmanship, personal security, and perhaps a certain machismo associated with firearms in American culture. It was another avenue where his vast fortune allowed him to indulge a personal passion on a grand scale, accumulating a private arsenal that was both valuable and reflective of his complex character. Number 6. His generosity was legendary. He gave away cars and houses like candy. If Elvis Presley earned money like a king, he often spent it like one too, especially when it came to showering gifts on others. His generosity wasn't just occasional. It was a constant, impulsive, and often extravagant part of his life. He seemed to derive genuine pleasure from sharing his wealth, sometimes to the point of financial recklessness, according to those who managed his affairs. We've already touched on the cars, the dozens of Cadillacs, Lincolns, and other vehicles he casually gave away to friends, family, employees, and even strangers he'd just met. Buying a car for someone was almost a routine gesture for Elvis. He'd hear someone admiring a car, or decide someone deserved a reward or needed help, and presto, they'd have keys in their hand. These weren't cheap gifts. We're talking thousands, often tens of thousands of dollars per car, given away sometimes multiple times a year, or even multiple times a day. But his generosity extended far beyond automobiles. Elvis frequently bought houses for people in his life. He bought homes for his parents and other relatives early in his career. Later, he purchased houses for close friends and members of his Memphis Mafia entourage, ensuring they had comfortable places to live. He famously bought a home for Linda Thompson's family, his girlfriend at the time. When he started dating Ginger Alden, he reportedly paid off the mortgage on her mother's house. These weren't just starter homes. They were often substantial properties, representing significant financial outlays. Jewelry was another favorite gift item. As mentioned, the TCB and TLC necklaces were signature gifts, but he also gave away countless rings, watches, bracelets, and other expensive pieces. He might admire a ring someone else was wearing and literally give them the much more expensive one off his own finger. He'd walk into a jewelry store and buy multiple high-priced items, specifically intending to give them away. Cash gifts were also common. Elvis was known to carry large wads of cash and would hand out $100 bills or more to people he felt deserved it or needed it. He paid medical bills for friends, acquaintances, and sometimes even strangers whose stories moved him. He covered tuition fees, funded vacations, and simply gave lump sums of money with no strings attached. His generosity extended to his staff and entourage. Beyond their salaries, he showered them with bonuses, gifts, and covered many of their living expenses. He wanted the people around him to share in his success and lifestyle. This wasn't calculated philanthropy. It seemed deeply ingrained in his personality, perhaps stemming from his own impoverished childhood. He knew what it was like to have nothing, and now that he had everything, he wanted to share it. Stories abound of his random acts of kindness, paying for everyone's meal in a restaurant, tipping extravagantly, helping someone stranded on the side of the road. The financial impact of this constant generosity was enormous. While individual gifts varied in cost, the cumulative amount spent on cars, houses, jewelry, cash handouts, and other presents over 2 decades ran into the millions of dollars. It was a significant drain on his resources, but for Elvis, it seemed a natural and essential way to live his life and express his affection and gratitude. His legendary generosity became as much a part of his mythos as his music or his mansion. Number 5. He bankrolled his entire inner circle, the Memphis Mafia. Elvis Presley rarely went anywhere alone. He surrounded himself with a rotating group of friends, family, and employees known collectively and affectionately, though sometimes critically, as the Memphis Mafia. This inner circle wasn't just along for the ride. They were essentially on Elvis's payroll, and he covered nearly all of their expenses, creating a unique and costly social ecosystem around himself. Who were they? The Memphis Mafia included childhood friends like Red West and Sonny West, who also served as bodyguards, his cousin Billy Smith, road managers like Joe Esposito, spiritual advisors like Larry Geller, and various other companions, aides, and hangers-on whose roles sometimes blurred the lines between employee and friend. At any given time, the group could number anywhere from a handful to a dozen or more people. Elvis paid them salaries for their various duties: security, managing logistics, assisting with personal needs, or simply providing companionship. But the salaries were just the beginning. He essentially funded their entire lifestyles. He often provided them with housing, either rooms at Graceland or separate apartments or houses that he paid for. Their transportation was covered. As we know, Elvis frequently gifted them cars. He also paid for gas, insurance, and repairs. When Elvis traveled, the Memphis Mafia traveled with him, all expenses paid. Flights, often on his private jets, hotel suites, meals, entertainment. Whatever Elvis did, they usually did too, and Elvis picked up the tab. He bought them clothes, often taking them on shopping sprees. He gave them jewelry, particularly the symbolic TCB necklaces, but also watches and rings. He covered medical expenses, gave them cash allowances or bonuses, and essentially ensured their material needs were always met. If a member of the Mafia needed money for their family or a personal project, Elvis was often the first person they turned to, and he usually provided. Why did he do this? Elvis craved loyalty, companionship, and a buffer against the outside world and the pressures of fame. The Memphis Mafia provided a sense of normalcy, or his version of it, security, and constant availability. They were his friends, his protectors, his playmates, and his support system, rolled into one. He wanted them around him 24/7, and paying for everything was the way to ensure that happened. The cost of maintaining this entourage was substantial. Think about it. Salaries, housing, multiple cars, travel costs for a dozen people, food, clothing, gifts, and miscellaneous expenses, year after year. It amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, a significant operational cost for Elvis Presley Enterprises, even beyond his own personal spending. This arrangement created a unique dynamic one of deep loyalty, but also dependence. The Memphis Mafia had access to an incredible lifestyle, but it was entirely contingent on Elvis's favor and financial support. For Elvis, it was the price of constant companionship and control over his immediate environment. Bankrolling his inner circle was one of the most consistent and significant expenditures of his fortune, shaping his daily life and insulating him within a world of his own making. Number 4. He spent big on horses and ranch life. While cars might be the first vehicle associated with Elvis, he also developed a deep love for horses and the equestrian lifestyle, pouring significant amounts of money into buying horses, property, and all the associated trappings. This passion really took off in the mid-1960s. In 1967, Elvis bought a 163-acre cattle ranch in Mississippi, just across the state line from Graceland, for a reported $400,000. He named it the Circle G Ranch, G for Graceland. This wasn't just a small paddock. It was a substantial property that he envisioned as a getaway and a place to indulge his growing interest in horses. He didn't just buy the land, he invested heavily in it. He bought trailers and mobile homes to house himself, his wife, Priscilla, and members of the Memphis Mafia when they stayed there. He bought farm equipment, trucks, and jeeps for navigating the property. And of course, he started buying horses, lots of horses. Elvis particularly favored American quarter horses and Tennessee walking horses. He bought horses for himself, for Priscilla, who was an accomplished rider, for his father Vernon, and for members of his entourage. He wanted everyone to be able to ride together. He didn't just buy a few. Reports suggest he acquired dozens of horses for the Circle G and later for Graceland itself. He purchased high-quality animals, sometimes paying premium prices for specific bloodlines or trained horses. One famous purchase was a beautiful golden palomino named Rising Sun, which became his personal favorite horse. owning horses is an expensive endeavor. Beyond the purchase price of the animals, there is the cost of feed, veterinary care, farrier services, hoof care, tack, saddles, bridles, etc., and stable maintenance. Elvis also needed staff at the Circle G Ranch to care for the property and the growing herd of horses. Even back at Graceland, he invested in his equestrian hobby. He built stables on the Graceland grounds to house some of his favorite horses, including Rising Sun, so he could ride without having to travel to the ranch. These stables added to the ongoing maintenance and staffing costs at his Memphis home. Elvis genuinely enjoyed riding and the ranch lifestyle. It offered a contrast to the craziness of his entertainment career. Photos from the era show him looking relaxed and happy on horseback, often riding with Priscilla and his friends across the fields of the Circle G. He enjoyed the image of the cowboy and the sense of freedom that came with riding. However, like many of Elvis's passions, his intense focus on the Circle G Ranch eventually waned. He sold the ranch after only a few years, though he kept some of his favorite horses at Graceland. Despite the relatively short period of intense investment in the ranch itself, the total amount spent on the land, improvements, equipment, dozens of horses, and their ongoing care represented another significant expenditure fueled by his immense earnings. His love for horses left a legacy in the form of the Graceland stables and iconic images of the king on horseback. Number 3. He turned a room in Graceland into a literal jungle. Perhaps no single room in Graceland better captures Elvis's unique, sometimes over-the-top decorating style and his willingness to spend money to realize a vision, than the den famously known as the Jungle Room. This wasn't just a room with a few tropical plants. It was a full-blown, immersive, Polynesian-inspired escape, built right inside his Memphis mansion. The transformation reportedly happened relatively quickly, in the mid-1970s. Elvis saw some furniture he liked in a Memphis store. Heavy, dark, carved wooden pieces with faux fur upholstery, and decided he wanted to create a whole room around it. This wasn't a subtle redecoration. It was a radical makeover. The room's most striking feature was the green shag carpet, not just on the floor, but famously also covering the ceiling. This immediately created a unique, somewhat cave-like atmosphere. The walls were adorned with rough-hewn stone, adding to the naturalistic grotto vibe. And then there was the indoor waterfall. A fieldstone wall at one end of the room featured a built-in functioning waterfall cascading down into a small pool. This element, more than any other, cemented the room's exotic, almost theme park-like feel. Imagine the plumbing and installation costs involved in adding an indoor water feature to an existing room. The furniture itself was a key part of the expense. The chunky dark wood chairs and tables, often described as ape-style due to their heavy carvings, were distinctive and certainly not cheap. Combined with the faux fur upholstery and accents, it created a specific, somewhat kitschy, tiki bar meets primitive lair aesthetic that was pure Elvis. Artificial plants and vines were strategically placed throughout the room to enhance the jungle atmosphere. Tiki, statues, and other Polynesian-themed knickknacks completed the look. The jungle room wasn't just for show. Elvis genuinely liked hanging out there. It was a place to relax with friends and family, away from the more formal areas of the house. It had a bar and comfortable seating, making it a popular spot for entertaining his inner circle. More significantly, the Jungle Room also served as a makeshift recording studio. In February and October of 1976, RCA brought mobile recording equipment to Graceland, setting it up in the den. Elvis, reluctant to travel to Nashville studios at the time, recorded numerous tracks there, including songs that would appear on his final albums from Elvis Presley Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee, and Moody Blue. Hits like Moody Blue and Way Down were actually laid down amidst the green shag carpet and the sound of the indoor waterfall. The acoustics must have been interesting, but the unique setting perhaps contributed to the raw, intimate feel of those later recordings. Creating the Jungle Room involved significant expense. The custom carpeting for floor and ceiling, the stonework, the waterfall installation, the unique furniture suite, the decorative elements. It was a prime example of Elvis seeing something he liked and sparing no expense to bring his vision to life, no matter how unconventional. Today, the Jungle Room remains one of the most popular and talked about rooms on the Graceland tour, a perfectly preserved monument to the King's singular taste and his ability to fund even his wildest design whims. Number 2. Those famous jumpsuits cost a small fortune each. When you think of Elvis in the 1970s, you inevitably picture him on stage in one of those spectacular rhinestone-studded jumpsuits with a matching cape. These weren't just costumes, they were elaborate, custom-made works of art that became synonymous with his Las Vegas-era persona, and they came with a hefty price tag. These iconic outfits were primarily designed by Bill Billou, who started working with Elvis for the '68 comeback special, and later by Jenna Toussaint, who handled much of the intricate embroidery and beadwork. Elvis wanted stagewear that allowed him freedom of movement, for his karate-inspired stage moves looked dramatic under the lights and projected an image that was larger than life, almost superheroic. The jumpsuits were typically made from wool, gabardine, or other sturdy fabrics that could withstand the rigors of performance. But it was the decoration that made them legendary and expensive. Each suit was heavily embellished with rhinestones, studs, intricate embroidery, and sometimes semi-precious stones. The designs were often thematic, leading to famous named suits like the American Eagle, worn for the Aloha from Hawaii concert, the Peacock, the Dragon, the Sundial, the Burning Love, and dozens more. Creating these outfits was incredibly labor-intensive. Jenna Toussaint and his team would spend hundreds of hours meticulously applying the studs, stones, and embroidery by hand. The sheer quantity of materials used was staggering. Some suits featured thousands of individual rhinestones and metal studs. The American Eagle cape alone reportedly weighed over 12 pounds due to the extensive beadwork and jeweled eagle design. This level of craftsmanship and material cost meant the jumpsuits were extremely expensive. Reports suggest that by the mid-1970s, a single custom jumpsuit could cost upwards of $10,000. Considering inflation, that's equivalent to over $50,000 or even $65,000 in today's money for one outfit. The capes and massive ornate belts that often accompanied the suits were separate, costly items themselves, sometimes adding thousands more to the total price of an ensemble. Elvis didn't just have one or two of these suits. He had dozens. He needed multiple suits for each tour or Vegas engagement, often rotating them between shows. He might wear a specific suit only a handful of times before commissioning new designs. Over the course of the 1970s, he likely commissioned well over 100 different jumpsuits. Multiply that by the cost per suit, And you're looking at a total expenditure easily running into the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars, just for his stage wardrobe. Beyond the initial cost, there was maintenance. The suits needed careful cleaning and frequent repairs due to the energetic nature of his performances and the weight of the embellishments putting stress on the fabric. Replacing lost stones or fixing torn seams was an ongoing task. These jumpsuits were a crucial part of the Elvis spectacle in his later career. They transformed him into a glittering, almost mythical figure on stage. They were a powerful visual statement of his stardom and his unique style. But achieving that look required a massive, ongoing investment, making his stage wardrobe one of the most dazzling and expensive aspects of his incredible fortune. Today, these jumpsuits are prized artifacts displayed in museums and fetching enormous sums at auction, symbols of the king in his dazzling prime. Number 1. He would buy out entire stores and rent amusement parks, just for fun. Perhaps nothing illustrates the sheer scale of Elvis's wealth and his impulsive desire for privacy and fun, more than his habit of renting out entire public spaces or arranging for private shopping sprees after hours. When the king wanted to go roller skating, see a movie, ride roller coasters, or buy some new clothes, he didn't just go during regular hours like everyone else. He often paid a premium to have the place all to himself and his entourage. One of his most famous haunts for these private events was the Memphian Theater, a local movie house in Memphis. Elvis loved movies, but going to a public showing was impossible due to the fan frenzy it would cause. So he frequently rented out the entire theater, usually starting late at night after the last public showing ended. He'd pay the theater management a hefty fee to keep the staff on projectionist, concession stand workers, and he and the Memphis Mafia would watch first-run films, sometimes double or triple features, until the early hours of the morning. He'd buy out the entire concession stand, popcorn, candy, sodas for everyone. This wasn't a one-time thing. Renting the Memphian became a regular occurrence, costing him thousands of dollars each time just for a few hours of private entertainment. He did the same with other types of venues. Roller skating rinks were another favorite. Elvis and his crew would take over a local rink after it closed to the public, spending hours skating, playing games, and enjoying themselves without interruption. Again, he paid the rink owners generously for the private access and staff time. Perhaps the most extravagant examples involved amusement parks. Elvis famously rented out the entire Libertyland amusement park in Memphis on several occasions, usually late at night. The first time was reportedly on August 8, 1975, from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., specifically for his daughter, Lisa Marie, and her friends, along with his usual entourage. Imagine having an entire amusement park to yourself, riding roller coasters like the Zippin' Pippin, Elvis's favorite wooden coaster, and other attractions repeatedly with no lines, all lights blazing just for you and your guests. The cost of renting an entire park, including paying the operators for all the rides and staff for several hours, would have been astronomical. He reportedly did this more than once, simply because he could and because it brought him and his loved ones joy. His desire for private experiences extended to shopping. Going into a department store or boutique during the day was a non-starter. Instead, Elvis would arrange for stores to stay open late or open exclusively for him and his group. He could then browse and shop at his leisure, often buying large amounts of clothing, jewelry, electronics, or whatever caught his eye, without being mobbed. There are stories of him doing this at Lansky Bros in Memphis, his longtime clothier, as well as other department stores and specialty shops during his travels. He'd pay not only for the merchandise, but likely also a significant fee to the store for the inconvenience and staff overtime. These private rentals and shopping sprees were the ultimate luxury afforded by his immense wealth. They allowed him a semblance of normal fun and activity, shielded from the constant pressures and attention of his fame. While practical in one sense, they were also acts of pure indulgence, costing thousands upon thousands of dollars for just a few hours of private enjoyment. It was Elvis creating his own world on his own terms, funded by a fortune that seemed at the time almost limitless